All right, so in this video, I want to show you how to solve these square root problems. So how to fill in this table and how to determine whether it's real or not. So first of all, we're going to create the table. So we have two columns. Don't seem to know I'm over here. Whoops. Board's not plugged in. There we go. Whoop. All right, there we go. That's better. Okay, so we have two columns. So x and f of x, and f of x equals the square root of x plus 6. All right, so our first x value is -7. So when x is -7, what we do is we put the x value into this function. So f of x is the square root of -7 plus 6. -7 plus 6 is -1. And the square root of a negative number, because when we do a positive times a positive, we get a positive. So if I do a positive squared, okay, if I do a negative squared, that gives me a negative times a negative. And I always use dots, guys, for multiplication, or we can use parentheses. Okay, dots or parentheses. Parentheses probably make more sense in this case. Don't use the x. And the reason that we use dots or parentheses is because this is algebra and x means that's a variable. So a negative times a negative also gives me a positive. So when I'm taking a square root, I'm doing the inverse of squaring, right? So if 2 squared equals 4, then the square root of 4 equals 2. So it's the inverse. And the whenever we square something, we can only end up with positive numbers. So the domain of this is always positive, which means if I have a negative number here, I cannot take the square root. It's impossible for me to get an answer without using imaginary numbers, which we're going to learn about later. So this is not real, which means it's not a real number. It's something else. Okay. And then the next one is -6. So now we do the square root of -6 plus 6, and that is the square root of 0, and that is 0. So I can take the square root of 0 because 0 times 0 gives me 0. So this one has an actual root. And then the next one is 19. So I'm going to put 19 in for x, so that gives me 19 plus 6, square root of 19 plus 6, which is the square root of 25, and that's 5. 5 squared gives me 25. And then I do 58, and the square root of 58 plus 6 is the square root of 64, and 8 squared is 64, so this is 8. So the answers here are, this first one is not real, so we click this, not a real number. This next one is 0. F of 19 is 5, and F of 58 is 8. So that's how we do those.